Hey everyone, and welcome to the Psyched to Practice podcast, your one stop for practical and useful clinical information, masterful insight from experts in the field, and a guide to daily living. I'm your host, Paul Wagner, and joining me is
Ray Christner.
And today we have a Living Psyched episode, just in time, I think, for the start of the school year. We're talking about back to school.
Yeah, it's I guess for some probably in just a couple days, maybe some get an extra week off, but yeah, it is that time of year again. So I think timely to just chat about. I don't know. I don't know that we have a perfect way to adjust to school, but I think some guidelines for people to think about to make it a smoother transition.
Yeah. And, Ray, we were kind of jumping to a couple different topics, but I'm wondering, was there any takeaways you had for today?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, as we were kind of talking through it, and I think we wrapped the episode up talking about thinking of this transition as an adjustment, and we just have to embrace it. And that, I think we are going to have some bumps in the transition, but we can build some routines that will smooth that out. And it really is kind of maybe testing things out to see what works best for each person.
Absolutely. And, I like the use of the word routines there. And I think we talked about routines as a whole throughout the day, but, there's one, I guess, part of the day that we touched on where I think, routines can very easily fall apart. And that's kind of the after school time. And, we jumped around between study routines, being active in routines, or, setting some routines surrounding screen time. But I think if we don't have some structure in that after school time, we're almost having to start over from scratch. But if we can build upon a routine and then we can fine tune it, it just helps us be more successful.
Yeah, I mean, I love the use of routines. I think for a lot of areas, this is definitely one. And that doesn't mean there's not spontaneity that happens, but yeah. So I think that I agree that structure is an interesting thing to kind of consider throughout the day. And for those of you listening, as always, join us on social media. We'd love to hear your ideas about back to school. We kind of shared some of ours and maybe some things from our own families. But what are things that maybe work for you? What advice do you have for others? So we'd love to hear from you.
And with that, we hope you enjoy this Living Psyched episode. School's back by summer. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Psyched to Practice podcast. Ray and I are here with a Living Psyched talking about back to school.
Yeah, this is, kind of one timely, but, I think a lot of us are going through it. For me, my back to school time is my daughter starting college, which is a whole different set of routines for her. And I'm guessing your kids are going back as well.
Yes. So one is second year of middle school. My oldest, she's entering her junior year, but this time driving to school. So that's kind of our new,
that's
our adjustment process. So we think we have a good plan with it, but see how it goes.
Yeah. I think, today just kind of talking about what are some tips about going back to school, whether you're starting kindergarten or you're going to college or in middle school or high school. I think we want to talk about some general things that just are good for that transition back to school and maybe help set up kids for success.
And one of the things that I think is crucial for this, especially as we're coming off of the summer, is talking about sleep. And, sleep is not a new topic. It's probably one of the thoughts that, every parent and hopefully the college, high school age or college age kids are thinking of too. But, we don't have the greatest sleep habits or sleep hygiene over the summer. And so as we're coming back into this structured area of our lives, I think really making sure that, I think especially in the beginning, like almost a minimum of 8 hours of sleep,
sure.
Or at least we're giving the capacity for 8 hours of sleep, whether we're, tossing and turning that's another story, but at least we're kind of resting our body and kind of getting set up to then give ourselves that time. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's I think that the starting point at 8 hours. I mean, that's what we hear our whole life, right? We should have 8 hours of sleep. I look at it as, I think this is going to be a recurring comment throughout the episode is really what's that sleep routine? Like, as far as having a consistent time that we're going to bed, having a consistent time we're getting up. If we need time before we go to sleep, what's that look like? But yeah, I mean, I think we undervalue sleep sometimes. And, and again, we're going to maybe talk about this a little later, but even the idea of devices in bed, how does that affect sleep? And, I see my own kids have done it. And I know other kids who, maybe have their phone, it's their alarm, but, they're watching YouTube videos before they go to sleep or whatever it might be. And I think, not that we have to eliminate those things, but how do we manage them in a way that it's not impacting us getting to sleep at a good time and being aware, what time do we really need to get up so we're not rushing out the door?
Absolutely. And, I think I'm a bit hypocritical in preaching sleep. And, I definitely have some work to do on my own sleep hygiene. My wife, it is a priority for her. And I see the benefits of it. And, I know I can tell the difference between, a 5-6 hour night and, one of those nights when I get a solid 8 hours of sleep. I'm waking up feeling refreshed. And, I think that a solid sleep routine can be hard to maintain at times, but especially here in the very beginning, I think we're just giving ourselves the best opportunity or the best chance to be successful if we're really advocating or pushing for those 8 hours. Yeah.
And I think, I would even go as far as saying, I think people need to know really the amount of sleep they need because I might be good at 8 hours, but, there are some adolescents that need more sleep than that. And, those who have teenagers, a lot of times they're not getting enough sleep. And there's research to say, even 9 or 10 hours is what's needed in that period of development. So, making sure we're kind of, paying attention to that. And that, if we have to be up at 6 o'clock in the morning, then what's that really mean for a true bedtime? And maybe let's just start 8 hours back, but we might have to adjust that as the year goes on.
Absolutely. And, I think when we're waking up that morning of hopefully well rested, but I think the conversation doesn't stop at sleep either. I think it's also talking about just a good morning routine. And, hopefully we're able to practice that here as we're kind of entering into the final countdown before the school year actually starts. But, hey, do we know kind of the tempo of the morning and how do we make sure that we're checking all the boxes of it?
Yeah, I like the word tempo. I think that's a good way to put it. Right. What is our, listen, I know when I am rushed in the morning and I fly out the door and I'm just scrambling to get into my office and my day starts, it really is not usually a good day. It usually starts out really bad. So yeah, what is the tempo? How much time do we really need to get ready? And again, I think a lot of times the problem we run into with whether it's back to school or whatever, when we're doing these morning routines is we think of it as how can we sleep the longest that we need to sleep? And instead, we need to think of, okay, how much time do I need for that morning? And what's my true wake up time? And then find our sleep moving backward. And you kind of had a good quote that you were talking about earlier that kind of got me thinking in that way.
Yeah. A guest from just a few episodes ago, or it may have even been last episode, it depends on the order that we're posting, but Dr. Ari Tuckman, he shared that he has a lot of his quotes that he likes to say. And I'm going to probably misquote, but hopefully capture the idea of if we're having a rough morning, then it's a nighttime issue. Yeah. And he's talking about ADHD, but that is just a universal truth. I think if we are staying up till midnight, expecting ourselves to wake up at 5:36, it's going to be rough. And, especially if it's poor sleep hygiene leading up to that. So making sure that we're setting ourselves up for success. And I love that idea of let's pick, the point that we're needing to really kind of, I know I need to be leaving at this point in time to be making it to work or to be making it to school. Mm-hmm. So that's really the anchor point that drives my, my bedtime. And like, it's a different tempo, and
it is. And I think then it allows us to kind of then move into this other area of kind of what we need to prepare for. And that's making sure we're also getting good nutrition. How many kids I see who are like, I don't eat breakfast. I don't have time to eat breakfast in the morning. And I'm like, we talk so much about how, having good nutrition is such fuel for our brain and for our bodies. And we have someone who's not eating till lunchtime. And, I've had kids who've had, super early lunches at school, but then also some that are very late. I always joke around and say, the Snickers commercials got it right, with the whole idea of being hangry or, and maybe it's not in a mood way, but it could be with an attention way. It could be with just how well we're really, feeling motivated to get things done. So, I think setting up that sleep routine and then that morning routine gives us the time. It doesn't mean we have to have, bacon, eggs, pancakes for breakfast, but enough that we can get some nutrition where it starts our day off in a good way.
Absolutely. And I know that, not only for our students returning back to school, but for parents as well, the morning is hectic. And, whether it's, facilitating them getting ready or getting ready for work ourselves, like sometimes we're out the door before our kids are needing to. Actually, that's kind of the issue that my wife and I are running into, where kind of with the schedule now, and with my oldest being able to drive in, we're both leaving before they have to leave, and so we don't really want to kick them out, so that way the house is getting locked up and shut down. But then that means that I'm not necessarily there to help facilitate making sure that they're eating. So sometimes we can be creative. Like I came home the other day and there's a little lazy Susan sitting on our kitchen counter now. And it's going to be the breakfast lazy Susan that's, we can spin it around and, you can pick what you want. And I'm sure they're going to get tired of things in that, but it's something we just have to be creative in some ways to make it work. But I do think oftentimes if we pause, we can kind of take the moment to really make sure we're meeting some of the needs. And, I think when it comes to breakfast, something is better than nothing.
Yeah, I agree. And I just had this conversation today with a parent about, they were like, well, with school starting, he's always running late and it's his responsibility to get breakfast. And if he doesn't get it, he doesn't get it. And I said, you know what? I think sometimes as parents, my teenage daughter has run late many, many mornings. And sometimes even as a parent, I go, okay, listen, hey, I'm going to throw something together for you. And maybe it's simply putting a toaster waffle in. I mean, it doesn't have to, again, be anything elaborate, or maybe it's a protein bar or something. But I love that idea of, having something available that's easily accessible. And, we're talking about kids going to school, but let's face it, we've all done that even as adults. I've rushed out in the morning and went, oh man, I just need to grab something. So having those things available, good start for the day. And, then it kind of leads to making sure we have nutrition throughout the day.
Absolutely. Well, and, Ray, we're talking about sleep and we're talking about nutrition, which, applicable everywhere. But I almost want to kind of get a little bit specific about expectations for school. And I think, as we're talking about how to prepare well for school, having accurate and realistic expectations for, how are we getting there? Do we have our materials that we're going to be needing? And making sure that we're not kind of setting maybe either too high of expectations of, we have to have everything right. And we have to, this needs to be a perfect day. And I think most first days of school, it's hard for it to be a perfect day. Sure. But I don't want to undershoot it either. I don't want to be like, I'll figure it out. Like, it's not a big deal, because then I think we're just kind of almost inviting in stress and pressure later on. So I think it's about, really kind of recognizing what is expected from school and kind of call upon, John Murphy. I think his name's kind of, since he's been here, been ingrained in most episodes since, looking for a solution of what does a good start to the school year look like? And how do we know that we're achieving that?
Yeah. I like the idea of expectations. And, some of this goes back to the executive function things we've talked about, with just making sure you have your things that you need. But, I encourage kids all the time to do that. And again, even adults, even from work, is not only what do we expect from the school year, but even every morning, like, what do I expect my day to be like today? What do I want to get out of it? And it's interesting, I think, having starting with a mindset of what the day is going to be like. And that doesn't mean, you can predict everything that's going to happen, but, what do you hope to accomplish? Like, what do you want to make sure you get done? I have a guy that I see for therapy who's a senior, and we just started last year with this, and we'll enter it again this year. It's one of the things we did is like, what are you going to set up for yourself? So it might be something simple as him going, okay, today, I have a lot going on in the evening, so I'm going to get my expectation is I'll have all my homework done before 5 o'clock today. Wow, that's a pretty ambitious goal, but now he knows. Now it's like, okay, I have something set because I know I'm going to the football game or whatever in the evening. So I want to have that done. It's interesting how when he sets it, it takes the pressure off. And it's almost like he's like, okay, like I know what I have to get done today. Or, kids maybe whose school's frustrating for, even going in and going, okay, I'm just going to keep a positive mindset today. I'm going to go in and my expectation is just going to try my best. Sometimes just those little things set us up for a better day.
And, it reminds me of something, and, on and off in, mental health courses, you hear about it, but the idea of subjective goals versus objective goals. And, right. And I kind of used a subjective language there earlier of like, how do I have a good day? Or, if that's my goal, I want to have a good day, but like, what does that even mean? That's the same as like, oh, I want to eat healthier.
Right.
What does that mean versus, objectively, I can say I want to have my homework done before 5 o'clock. And right. So that's a very clear, if 5 o'clock is there, I can look at it and say, well, have I achieved that goal? Yes or no? Right. And, I think if we're setting, especially short-term goals for ourselves to kind of, to use almost as like checkpoints to see how we're doing, those objective content or that objective content goals are really, really valuable because it really lets us have a more accurate view of how are things going? And, if I'm consistently not hitting those goals, well, why? Am I expecting too much? Am I not putting up, going back to executive function, am I not activating when I should be doing it? Or, am I not prioritizing right? So I think, just good goal setting skills and good goal setting in general is a helpful thing here.
I mean, I think it helps with behavioral activation for sure. It definitely gets us going. And again, I also like them just for the mindset piece. I remember being in college and having days where I just didn't want to go to class and do something. And, I would always tell myself, okay, my goal today is I'm just going to learn one thing. That's it. Like I'm probably not going to learn everything but I'm going to learn one thing. And that sounds so simple to say that to yourself. And it's like, okay, really? Like I'm only going to get one little piece of information out of my day. But reframing it in a way where it wasn't overwhelming, where it wasn't like, oh man, I'm tired. I'm never going to get through these classes. And I went, okay, if I just learned one thing today was a successful day. The reality is that I probably learned 20 things. But I gave myself some permission. I changed my mindset. And I think we have to do that with kids is, really kind of focusing on trying to just that expectation being something a positive direction.
Absolutely. Well, and, I think that expectation and being present, like, throughout the school day. And I think the school day, when the school day ends, though, that's not the end of the conversation here for, setting up, what is a successful start to the school year? I think it's also really important what happens after school for us.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think, again, we're going to keep repeating the word routine, but yeah, what's the routine look like after school? Even knowing when we're going to study, where we're going to study. But But I even think it's important to do routines beyond that. I know school for some kids, it's sitting all day, and that can be so mentally taxing. And what do we do as a physical outlet? Like, when do we incorporate that? Like, when you get home, like, what do you need to do? Maybe it's going outside, and that can be part of our school day routine, is making sure we're getting some physical activity. We've been sitting in school all day. So what can we set up to make sure that we're doing that? So it doesn't have to all be about study skills after school. That's something else, but we can do, even start with something physical.
And, a lot of, especially the fall time sports are now like, I think most of the student athletes that I see have already started their practices. Yeah. And, I think they're like the coaches and the team is kind of taking a page out of it. They're already setting a routine. They're already setting an expectation of, hey, at this time, this is what you're going to be doing. This is what to expect. It'll probably get a little bit more intense in the school year, or, maybe right before a game or a match, it's going to be refining skills. But, talk about a great physical outlet. And certainly, I know sports is not for everyone. And, I know myself during high school, or doing my school year, I didn't really want to do it, but I always felt really good afterwards. So I think it's a worthy conversation to bring up. If we can encourage interactions, and, whether it's extracurricular with sports, through the school system or outside of that, but great social outlet and social connections as well. Right. It is not the only way. I think that if you were to put like some sort of calorie tracker on some of the students that are involved in band, they might be, they might be higher than certain athletes.
Absolutely.
Like, there's a lot of physicality. So just that idea of being active. And I think school provides a great opportunity, and especially if your child has been kind of kicking around the idea, it can meet a social need as well as the physical need. And so I think it's a worthy conversation to start.
Yeah. And I agree. It doesn't have to be athletics. You could do theater and be exhausted physically, right? Yes. I mean, it's, it can be anything, but I think the key is, what is that physical piece? Like, what do we do to get our body moving? It can be going on a walk with your parents. It can be going for a bike ride. It could be just running around the yard, or it could be something more structured. I mean, I think we have so many options, but the key to it is, how do we make it part of the day? It's really easy to just come home and want to watch TV. It's really easy to want to take a nap, but we know after sitting all day that physical activity of any sort is just good for kids. It's a good reset for them. And then we move into the other parts of the routine. We do have study time that kids have to put in place, and there's homework and those types of things, and relaxation. What's the time how do you just chill out a little bit? And that can come in all kinds of forms. I think it really depends on the kid. I mean, I think probably the most popular that I hear is they want their downtime to involve a screen of some sort.
And right, I think we have to be prepared for just about any kid that can overhear us to be telling their parent to turn it off. But, right. We're talking about routines, and as much, as there might be that craving and that desire for screens, I think it's also something that we have to be mindful about setting a routine with as well. And you were kind of sharing right before we started recording. What was the study that you were referencing?
Oh, yeah. So actually just the American Academy of Pediatrics has a report that they put out that, what is the recommended use for screen time? Now, this gets a little gray because let's face it, our kids are on screens a lot during the school day. So, and after school, like we now have, laptops or tablets that they're bringing home. But essentially their kind of suggestion, and one I would encourage as well, is on school days, 1 hour of down screen time. So meaning that it is things that they're doing for enjoyment, video games, watching YouTube videos, whatever it might be. That is a 1 hour limit on school nights. And I will say, kids that we've been able to do that with, it really has helped. They haven't liked it. That doesn't mean it's a positive thing, but it's helped. And when we, how do these things link together? Well, if you have some physical activity or some social activity that you're doing during the day, that lessens your time on the screen naturally. Yes. So we can kind of truncate the amount of time by simply adding other things into it. But that being said, on the weekends, that can be extended. Now, again, American Academy of Pediatrics, they suggest no more than 2 hours, even on non-school days during the school year. I know that would be tough for some of the kids that I see. Yes. I don't know that has to be a hard, fast rule all the time. But it is a guideline we should really, I think, try to achieve. And again, getting involved in other things will help that.
And I think especially for our, if we have some students that we're able to have that more like rational conversation where they're able to recognize that I don't like that there's this limitation, but I actually can hear that there's a value and a benefit. So, I don't think necessarily lecturing in the moment, especially if they're pushing back against it. But if we're talking about why these routines are in place and what the value of it is, being able to share that, it's going to have a positive impact on mood, on, our ability to concentrate and focus, and it frees us up for other healthy activities because, and I know myself at that age, I just wanted to play video games. That was all I wanted to do. And just because I wanted it didn't mean it was the best thing for me.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just like eating your vegetables, right?
Yeah, delayed gratification.
Right. But now, I mean, I think that piece is, it is a hard conversation to have rationally with some kids. And that doesn't mean we don't work to still set a good routine. And, again, the success I've seen hasn't necessarily been about long conversations with kids. It's about setting the routine that naturally makes that hour available. And that means there's got to be other things going on, and we have to set times for those things. And it's a great way to end the day. I think it's great, whether it's video games or YouTube or whatever they want to do. I don't know that's a bad way to wind down. And, then that leads us to another routine, of course, where we have to then start preparing. How do we get to bed? But that can be part of it. I often will tell kids, like, when's the best time to play video games? And, what's the time that if we're going to use this and this is going to be part of your day, if you had to pick a time, when is it? And I've had parents go, why does it matter? Well, most of these games are social experiences for kids too. So, if they want to play whatever it is, Fortnite or whatever, and all their friends are on from 5 to 6 and they can't get on until 7 to 8, it might be different for them. So it's, so let the kids be part of the schedule. Let them be part of, okay, what's a good time to do it? And, again, they would love 2 hours, but if they have some say in it, maybe there's a little bit more compliance. And maybe for those who are using it excessively, maybe we have to work toward that. If you're playing 3 hours a night and we all of a sudden say, okay, now you're only allowed 1, we're going to get resistance. But maybe if we go, okay, we're going to cut back 15 minutes a night or 15 minutes, we'll cut back 15 minutes, do that for 2 nights, cut back 15 minutes and kind of wean down to that hour might be an easier kind of transition.
And certainly I'm not trying to go against the American Pediatric Association, but there's, Ari Tuckman is just getting a ton of screen time here, but he talks about more for older teens, running failable experiments. And so, if I would say, high school age is probably where this is starting to be appropriate, but like, no, I can handle it. No, I can be responsible for this. Like, let them prove it, and if they can, and they're able to maintain social engagements, they're able to get the physical activity, they're able to, regulate emotions, and they're able to kind of hit all of those markers. Okay. But chances are, like, if we give them that opportunity and then they're not being successful, then we're not the bad guys. And then, like, we can kind of collaborate and say, okay, well, how do we work to maybe give you this opportunity? How do we kind of strengthen these skills a little bit more so, meeting our needs and finding a better harmony, in our day-to-day routine. So that way, either you're recognizing that an hour is probably actually the best here, or, hey, you're doing really well. Here's an hour and a half or something along those lines.
Right. Yeah. And I like the idea of experiments, and it is really about what's the right harmony for each kid. And that might vary. Like, I agree. I think the guidelines that we see, sure, that's what we hope. But some kids can handle more, and that's okay. And I think, guidelines are great. Sometimes though, I've even had kids where we worked with parents and said, listen, like, if they really can kind of pull off a good schedule, then maybe on a Friday night, hey, maybe you do play 3 hours. Maybe we're an hour above what the recommended guidelines are. That might not be a bad thing, but it's in the kids' control to show us they can handle it. And you mentioned teenagers. I even think we could trickle that down even for younger kids and saying, hey, let's give it a try. And if it works, wonderful. And if not, then we have to make adjustments.
Yeah. All right. I think then that brings us back up to sleep.
Yeah, it's where we start and where we end. So, I guess the last part of our school day kind of experience is, how do we start winding down to really prepare to do it all over again? And, I maybe sounds simple, but we all should kind of have a bedtime routine. What does that look like? And, when do we start? If we want to be in bed by 9 o'clock, kind of the same as I think we said about the morning routine. How much time do I really need to do it? I know for me, like, I'm not a person that can just walk in bed and fall asleep. Like, there's a process for me, and I read a little bit. I do a few different things. So if my bedtime is 10 o'clock, I need to start that probably about 9 o'clock to realistically hit that goal of 10 o'clock. That's going to vary person to person, but what's that routine going to look like?
And another thing that, let's set a baseline of the expectations of what are the things that we're actually needing to do. And, maybe it's laying out clothes for the next morning. So that way we take that off of our checklist. Maybe it's, hey, we're unwinding and we're spending some time reading, or we're getting a story read to us. But really, I think creating, and I like the term good sleep hygiene. I think that varies in person to person, but it is trying to avoid screens for that past. I think it's an hour or so before we're trying to get ready for bed. Trying to create a relaxing environment. So, we're not up and we're not running around, or, it's not the time to, play WrestleMania, and jump on the bed or anything like that, but rather, just kind of creating that calm environment. I think, our kids certainly benefit from that. And, I think I don't know an adult who doesn't enjoy just some peace and quiet at the end of a long day. And certainly, the start of the school year is a tough time. It's change. And actually, I think in an upcoming episode, we're going to be kind of diving into what constitutes some of these changes in life transitions. But I think school is certainly one of them. So being able to just give ourselves that opportunity to recognize, hey, it's probably going to be a bit bumpy, and that's okay. And as we're kind of going through, we're going to be able to fine tune it, and then we're going to be able to kind of get into a good flow.
It's adjusting to the adjustment, right?
Absolutely.
It is that piece of, and I think that's a great way to end it, is that, try things out, make some changes as needed. Maybe for your child, laying the clothes out the night before so they can sleep in an extra 5 minutes is good for them. And for others, maybe they'd rather get up early and have a chance to do something else before bed. There's no right or wrong in these things. It's just really about what's the right routine that creates good, healthy habits that leads to a successful school year from kindergarten to college.
It's a valuable skill to learn.
You have it.
Yeah. Well, and with that, we hope you enjoy this episode, and be sure to check back in next week. But until then, be well, stay psyched.